Democrats lead Trump impeachment lawyer to run for Congress. Daniel Goldman, a former federal prosecutor who led House Democrats' efforts in former President Trump's first impeachment, on Wednesday announced a bid for Congress. He joins an unwieldy and hotly contested primary for a newly drawn open 10th congressional district based in New York City. Other Democratic candidates include former New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, Rep. Mondaire Jones and New York Assemblywoman Yuh-Line Niou. Goldman's profile skyrocketed in 2019 during the televised House impeachment proceedings looking into whether Trump threatened to withhold aid from Ukraine to push for an investigation into Niou. The House ultimately impeached Trump, but the former president was acquitted in a Senate trial. In a statement, Goldman hinted that he intends to focus much of his campaign on Trump and his own role in the impeachment. The existential threats to our democracy and our fundamental rights are clear and imminent, Goldman said. This is a five-alarm fire that too many Democrats in Washington are treating as a tiny, distant flame. Donald Trump and the Republican Party he controls are not only trying to take away our rights but are tearing down the foundations of democracy itself. Right now, everything is at stake: the right to choose, the right to vote, the right for all people to reclaim the American dream. I have fought Donald Trump and the Republicans before, and I spent a decade fighting crime in New York City. I am running for Congress to lead the fights for our democracy, our fundamental rights, our safety, and our planet itself. Goldman announced a campaign for State Attorney General last year but dropped out of after current Attorney General Letitia James, D., decided to run for re-election. The crowded primary is the result of New York's redistricting process, which was thrown into tumult after state courts tossed out Democratic drawn maps and established new ones, including the new version of the 10th district. The district is deep blue, meaning that the August 23 primary is likely to decide the ultimate victor, and the absence of an incumbent is leading to a flood of ambitious Democrats. For his part, de Blasio has widespread name recognition in the city after his 8 years as mayor. Jones, meanwhile, hails from a suburban district but pivoted to the new seat to avoid a primary against Rep. Sean Patrick Maloney, who oversees House Democrats' campaign arm. Jones could face attacks since he is not from the district, but he won a big endorsement Wednesday from Rep. Jamie Raskin, DMD, the lead impeachment manager in Trump's second impeachment trial following the 2021 insurrection, an endorsement that could undermine Goldman's message. After 2 decades in politics, I can tell the difference between justice politicians and power politicians. Mondaire Jones is the quintessential justice politician, said Raskin. America needs fighting progressives with heart, brains and, above all, legislative skill. That's why I'm delighted to endorse Mondaire for re-election. Thank you, New York, for sending him to do battle with us in the House. Donald Trump is pushing an insane conspiracy about the Georgia governor's race. 1 week ago, Georgia Republican Governor Brian Kemp crushed former Senator David Perdue by 52 points in a high-profile primary fight. On Tuesday, former President Donald Trump, who endorsed Perdue, suggested that something was fishy about that race. Something stinks in Georgia, Trump sent in a press release via his Save America PAC. The press release referred to a Substack post by Emerald Robinson, a former White House correspondent for Newsmax who now works for Lindell TV, which was founded by MyPillow CEO and election conspiracist Mike Lindell. Robinson's argument is a little all over the place, but essentially boils down to this: Trump's endorsement record is very strong, so, there must be something wrong in Georgia where a number of his preferred candidates, including Perdue, lost. She writes: President Trump's endorsement is the single most powerful force in the universe of American politics. There's never been anything quite like it. Trump-endorsed candidates overwhelmingly prevailed in the latest GOP primaries by a margin of 24-4. In fact, President Trump is running the table on the GOP establishment in the 2022 races. His record stands at 92-7 at the moment. That's what makes the primary results in Georgia last night so curious and so suspect. Georgia is the only state where President Trump's endorsements did not count. Robinson also notes Trump-endorsed candidates fared better in a poll released a month before the Georgia election compared to the final results. That's it. That's the extent of the argument. So, because Trump's record of endorsements in 2022 is generally strong, the fact that he endorsed a bunch of candidates in Georgia who lost must mean that there were shenanigans happening. Something stinks in Georgia, concludes Robinson. The numbers are funny because many of these races were rigged. Before I go any further, it's probably worth mentioning here that Robinson was taken off the air at Newsmax late last year after she tweeted this about the COVID-19 vaccines. Dear Christians, the vaccines contain a bioluminescent marker called luciferase so that you can read the last book of the New Testament to see how this ends. No. Robinson's contract at Newsmax was eventually not renewed. Now, let's consider what Robinson is alleging here. Kemp received 885,924 votes in last week's primary. Purdue, on the other hand, won just 261,804 votes. That's a difference of 624,120 by percentages. Kemp got 73.7% of the votes while Purdue got 21.8%, a gap of 51.9 percentage points. According to Robinson, those numbers are funny and rigged. Which is a pretty big claim to make without any evidence other than a month-old poll and suggestions that Trump's endorsement had mattered in other states and, therefore, had to matter. Is Robinson claiming that more than 600,000 votes, Kemp's winning margin, were somehow fraudulent? If so, how? That sort of massive election fraud would be extremely hard to cover up. No, let me suggest an alternative, insane, explanation. Georgia Republicans are, yes, generally supportive of Trump, but there remains some lingering resentment that Trump's relentless focus on the 2020 election may have cost the GOP 2 Senate seats in January 2021 runoffs, and, with them, the Senate majority. Therefore, backing candidates solely because they are willing to endorse Trump's baseless election claims may be less appealing to Georgia Republican voters than voters in other states where Trump's endorsement has met. That seems slightly more plausible than Robinson's fact-free suggestion of hundreds of thousands of votes being somehow manipulated to hurt Trump, right?